there was a time where you yourself felt like something of a lone voice within. Which force were you with at the time?
I worked for Greater Manchester Police for 16 years.
And it was Rochdale,
And
wasn't it, where you were?
well, I was part of the major incident team. So Operation Span was about abuse in and around Rochdale. The previous big case I worked on, Operation Augusta in 2005, was in and around Manchester city centre. But, very little has actually changed from that time. And, you've just mentioned that today's case, which is the Bradford case, that is an old investigation from abuse from many years ago. But my work with the Maggie Oliver Foundation, which I've started 2 years ago, shows me, Christo, that nothing has, that very little has changed. This kind of abuse is still at an epidemic level throughout the country, and the authorities are still failing to deal with it properly.
Are they still mainly Pakistani male grooming gangs?
Yes, they are. This particular kind of sexual abuse is predominantly Pakistani men abusing young, white, very vulnerable children. By saying that, though, I am in no way, shape or form racist. But what, for me, a man who abuses a child, has sex with a child, is a paedophile and is a criminal. So whether that is a priest in a Catholic church, whether it's Jeffrey Epstein or Harvey Weinstein or whoever it may be, the gang today, as a country, we need to address that, and we need to use the law to prosecute paedophiles. And what has happened for too many years, and is still going on, is that the authorities are tiptoeing around this particular kind of crime. And over the past 20 or 30 years, the authorities have buried their head in the sand and hidden from the reality of what is going on, and in the process have cast thousands of children to the wind to be repeatedly abused. And that was why I started the foundation.
Is it particularly, though, which is what I want to get to the heart of, are the police failing in pursuing all sorts of grooming gangs, or is it particularly the Pakistani grooming gangs that they are failing to prosecute for the reasons we'll get onto? But is that what's happening, do you say?
I think that's why they have, one of the main reasons they turned a blind eye for a long time.
And is it still happening today with Pakistani grooming gangs?
It is still happening today, but I would go further and say that rape and sexual abuse itself is being decriminalised in many ways. When you look at the report from the CPS only last month to say that less than 1% of reported rapes end up in court, that's ignoring the rapes that are never reported. We have a crisis in our criminal justice system, and abusers and rapists know that. And when you add to that the dynamic that this particular kind of sexual abuse has the added factor of the authorities tiptoeing around because they have been historically frightened of being accused of racism, we have generations of children that are not being protected, that are not being kept.
So you're saying
can I just add to that, Christo, that I think that there is another dynamic, which is a class dynamic, really. You look at the Sarah Everard murder and abuse, and look at how the media reported that. And we had wall-to-wall media coverage of that. And yet every single day we get another grooming gang now that we read about in the paper. And yet nothing seems to change. And I think it's because these children are seen as an underclass. They are judged. They are blamed. And they don't have... Many of them don't have somebody like me in their home fighting for them. And the authorities turn a blind eye because it's easier to do so. They don't upset the chief constable or, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who would not accept this kind of behaviour. So that's, in my opinion, another factor as to why it has been...
And let's not forget, you're not saying, and I just feel like we need to give this caveat, though I know that this isn't what you're saying. There are going to be people of Pakistani origin who are as horrified as you about this. There is no way that this is endemic among all Pakistani men. And in fact,
No.
am I right in thinking that it was a Pakistani Muslim police chief who actually pursued reopening this a few years ago, which got some of these prosecutions underway? So you know, it is not a comment that is being made here against all Pakistani men, but it is the fear of us or people who make this point being accused of being racist. It is a fear among the authorities that they are going to be accused of being racist by some of these people, and by some people who are angry, that is stopping these girls getting justice and stopping these investigations happening.
I think it's very complex. I think because the authorities have turned a blind eye for so many years, these gangs have become very sophisticated. They know how to avoid prosecution. And I am not saying it's easy to prosecute these cases, but, you know, we have in the foundation, in the Maggie Oliver Foundation, where, you know, I have a fantastic team now of almost 40 volunteers who we couldn't operate without them. We need funding, we need money to expand. We need more volunteers, but we are seeing a surge in cases that are increasingly complex, and they require real time and resources to be dedicated to them. And in the same way, the police forces have to dedicate time, resources, commitment, experience, training to solving this problem. And I don't accept for one single moment that we can't solve it. Within the Pakistani community, I would like to see spokespeople for that community come and work with the foundation, come and call out what is going on. There is abuse everywhere, and wherever we see it, we have to call it out. If it was Jimmy Savile abusing a child next door to me, I wouldn't be reticent about calling that out because he happened to be white. For me, the common denominator is that these men are paedophiles, and we have to address it. And if we don't, what we are doing, we are leaving these survivors and these victims at the mercy of very sophisticated ground. Yeah, we're enabling them.
Yeah, we're enabling them.
We've yeah, and individual police forces, we now have a process where when individual police forces fail to deal with the victims who are approaching them, we refer them to Operation Hydra, which is the national lead. And we are finding that the worst offenders in not dealing with the cases, we have found at West Yorkshire Police and GMP, we've seen a 45% increase in cases warranting a referral in the past 2 months.
It's so difficult. I don't know how you're doing it. Well, we'll take a quick break, but we'll come back to this. But I want you to just tell me when we come back, how do you not just... Because I'm getting so angry hearing about it. It's really difficult to keep your cool when you're talking about this, because these girls are being failed. They're being failed. And I don't know why this is going on. I don't know what eggshells are being walked on that is stopping these cases being investigated. Surely you would rather be accused of racism and get justice than just let this fester. Surely.
I think, I mean, for me, it's become my life, and the team that I now have, it's gone from me on my own to a team of nearly 40 people. And yet we are all drowning. We need help to proceed with supporting survivors to be heard, because we are a small national charity. The authorities are still not doing what they need to be doing. I feel like a broken record, really, Christo. Keep saying the same things, but if I don't say it, who else is going to? I don't really care who I upset. I didn't go into this to make friends. I have gone into it to tell the truth. And I am sharing the truth that victims and survivors are sharing with the Maggie Oliver Foundation every single day.
Why aren't these, because it's a question I've asked on the radio before, but why aren't these prosecuted as well as hate crimes? Because if the victims are being chosen because of their race, when you, as you will know as an officer, when you target someone for a crime and there is an element of prejudice within there for someone's race or sexual orientation, for instance, they are prosecuted as a hate crime as well as the crime itself. Why aren't these perpetrators being prosecuted for hate crimes?
You know what, Christo? They're not even being prosecuted at all.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I'd be really happy if they were prosecuted at all. And what I would say is that there are many cases that would never cross. You know, I'm a former police officer. There are many cases that would never cross the threshold for a prosecution. What we're fighting for in the foundation is for every survivor, every victim, to be treated with empathy, with compassion, with integrity, with decency, and be honest with them, communicate with them. If there isn't the evidence to take it to court, you know, most victims will accept that if they had been treated like, you know, decent human beings. But when they are fobbed off and they know they're being fobbed off, that's why they come to us to advocate for them, to fight their corner, for them to be heard. That is what we need to do. We need to treat victims with respect
when you
and
were,
with consideration.
when you were in the room those years ago, and you were fighting to get justice and for these victims to be heard, what kinds of excuses were you hearing? What was being said as to why these prosecutions or investigations couldn't go ahead?
The normal excuse is that a victim has disengaged or won't engage, or there is insufficient evidence. I couldn't accept that, and that was not the case, and that was why I resigned. Because, you know, when you've got children telling you that they're being raped on a daily basis, when you've got a man that got he was abusing a 12-year-old, he got her pregnant at just 13, when that man is not charged with rape, when we have a child who has been passed around the houses from, you know, here to kingdom come, who is being treated as a madam when she's a child of 15, that is just not the job that I joined to do.
Because there was a perception that some of these children were consenting, or that it was their choice to be what was being described as prostitutes.
Yeah, and there still is, Christo. You know, I've been in a meeting with the CPS only 2 weeks ago where there is an insistence that, you know, basically, if it warrants it, that the CPS will use the evidence or the victims in whatever way they see fit. I don't agree with that. And that was why I walked away from my job. So whatever excuses are given, for me, every child, and by that, I'm including children up to the age of 18, because that is what the legislation says. Every child who is being raped by a man of 40, 50, 60 years old is a victim of abuse. You know, I would see it slightly differently. If you've got a child of 15 and a boyfriend of 17, you know, that is not what we're talking about here. We are talking about, a 12-year-old child who is befriended. That child might not have ever had any love, any affection, any care, any kindness. A predatory man who comes in, who knows precisely what he's doing, that child is a sitting duck. She is, you know, if you can't, you know, we have in domestic violence legislation now, Krista, we have controlling and coercive behaviour. If a married woman of 40 odd years cannot get out of an abusive relationship with one man who is keeping her trapped in a house, what chance has a child of 12 or 13 got of resisting a gang of maybe 10 or 20 men who are threatening that child?
Is it just resources? I mean, I really want to get to the heart of whether it's still happening now, that forces are worried that they are going to be seen as racist, or whether it's about the resources that they don't have to give the time, as you alluded to, them being complex investigations. So what is happening now that is still stopping these getting investigated?
I do believe that really, since I started talking out in 2013, and we weren't talking about these gangs really. I believe that the cat is out of the bag. The public know what's going on. I don't really think that is the problem now with the authorities. I think the problem is that they are still judging these girls. I think they are very difficult cases to prosecute. I think that the police and the authorities have a lack of adequately trained officers. There is not sufficient resources there to deal with it. And these children are very easy to dismiss and cast aside. But the crux of the matter is that where there is a will, there is a way. And I am in no doubt that if this was the Chief Constable's daughter, or it was the daughter of, Boris Johnson, there would not be the insistence on turning away from these children. It's a number of things.
So it's class, it's race, it's resources, it's all sorts. Because I read something that you wrote where I'm pretty sure you stated that you think actually some of the officers that have continually turned a blind eye, that they should be prosecuted.
I do 100% believe that the chief constables who have deliberately turned a blind eye to these kind of cases should be standing in a criminal court charged with misconduct in a public office and gross criminal neglect. And really, I go back to the Operation Augusta case that I worked on in 2005. Andy Burnham put together an independent review about, after I'd spoken out in 2016, he put together an independent review, and that reported last January that Greater Manchester Police deliberately and intentionally and knowingly closed that job down when we had about 100 offenders on a database. And the official line of that report, which I know is the truth, was that they were not prepared to put resources in. They would not resource that investigation. GMP have now been forced to reopen that case that they closed in 2005, which is, it's better late than never. But my response to that is that closing that job was unforgivable. And for the past 15 years, those 100 plus paedophiles have continued to rape children, probably every day of their lives. And so by the authorities turning a blind eye, they should be standing in a criminal court, because if I deliberately failed to record a criminal damage as a serving police officer, I would lose my job. Those senior officers have walked away with big pensions. They are in, cozy jobs now. I don't know how they sleep at night. So until we prosecute at least one of them for their deliberate neglect, I don't think we will really see the changes that we need in dealing with this. I think if one of them ended up in prison, every other chief constable and every other senior officer in this country would think twice before they closed another job down.
And what's interesting and horrific is also there's a massive failing, isn't there, of those victims who are even becoming known to the authorities. I mean, I remember when I worked on Loose Women, we put on Sammy Woodhouse, and I remember that she had had a baby by her abuser, and the baby and the father was being given access. She was having to fight even after he'd been prosecuted. There was the other story that you spoke about in the piece that you wrote in the Telegraph. I compel anyone to go and read that piece that Maggie wrote a few days ago, where there was a victim by the name of Anna who was taken away from her parents and put into foster care and ended up living basically as an Islamic wife, becoming pregnant by her foster carers. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And I'm led to believe that her social worker, she was 15 years old, and her social worker was even a guest at the marriage when she was 15. Her husband,
her social worker was at her marriage when she was 15.
That's what I'm led to believe. That child was in care. How on earth social services gave permission for her to be married, I don't know. But with Sammy, I mean, you may remember, Christo, that Loose Women had a series that was called Never Too Late to Tell, and myself and Sammy were part of that. Now, Sammy has fought long and hard to highlight the failures that she was subjected to. But we are now 20 years further on, and actually, I think yesterday there was a case that was led by the Centre for Women's Justice, in which it is for the very first time there has been a prosecution of a man who got a 13-year-old girl pregnant, and the child brought a case against him. And I think that case was won yesterday. So I do believe that very slowly, far too slowly, we are moving in the right direction. And I think that is because me amongst others will not shut up about this until we solve the problem.
And of course, I know that I was again one of the producers behind Never Too Late to Tell, because I was passionate about getting this on Loose Women, obviously with your help, and you were amazing at the time. But why do you think other media don't seem to want to talk about this so much?
I think that every day we have a different case, and they that there is, I think we do have the coverage in the media now. I would like to see the spotlight focusing on on the specifics of it, rather than just reporting it as yet another case. I mean, the Never Too Late to Tell campaign was great, but I would have liked to have gone further. I would have liked to engage as I say, the Pakistani community to work together, because I do believe that the answer lies in working together, in honestly open, in being transparent about the problems, in being honest about where the solutions lie, in the authorities not covering up and not pretending that we don't have a problem. And if we do that, I do think that we can solve this, but it will take commitment, resources, time, and honesty. And a lot of those things are missing in the Home Office, in the individual police forces. That is where we need the changes. And in the meantime, any survivors who are struggling to be heard, come to the Maggie Oliver Foundation, self-refer through the website, donate to us if you can, and we will help. We're building an army, and our volunteers and myself and my team, we understand the problems, and we are not going anywhere.
And it's the MaggieOliverFoundation.com. Presumably you go there as well if you want to actually volunteer, because I've got a few tweets. Just one final question for you, Maggie. How are you?
Knackered. Pardon my language. No, it's taken over my life, if I'm honest, Christian. I didn't expect this when I left the police, but I do feel that I'm sharing the load now with a fantastic team of volunteers. That's why I started the foundation, because one person cannot solve this problem. We need an army. So if you've got people out there willing to take on the challenge, willing to fight for justice and for children who are not being heard, then please get in touch with us, because we really do need you.
Well, I'd really like to stay in touch and get you back on more, if that's all right, and we keep across what you're doing and what you're achieving with this. You're a formidable woman, Maggie. I've said it before, and you really are, and you are picking up the baton where many other people and many other authorities and many other agencies are failing, and you're a saint for that. And actually, someone has actually tweeted saying, why isn't it Dame Maggie Oliver? And I could not agree more. Maggie Oliver, thank you so much. Maggie, the MaggieOliverFoundation.com is the way to find out more information if you need help, if you're a survivor, or indeed you want to get involved by helping Maggie yourself. We're going to take a quick break. We'll have the news headlines, and then when we'll come back, we'll have our political panel talking about this and some of the other big stories of the day right here on Talk Radio.